With so many options, why choose Arizona State University?
For me, the only online option was ASU because of the quality. Their faculty was really involved with their students and care about your personal journey. The dedication to my personal development from my professors, that's been extremely valuable to me.
Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
Owning a boat comes with a number of perks, like being able to fling your favorite fishing rod around. And here's another perk. Geico's boat insurance covers your boat and your belongings. And with specialist support from agents that are as passionate about boating as you are, there's so much value that you'll want to high-five someone. But not while you're holding your fishing rod. That's a prized possession. So hold on tight with both hands and keep it covered through boat insurance. Get more with Geico.
This is Wheelbearings. I'm Dan Roth.
And I'm Sam Abu-El-Samad.
It's been a very busy period of a few weeks, days.
No, it's all Dan's fault.
It's all totally my fault. I got super disappointed.
Dan blew me off a couple of times. And
I did. Well, so here's what happens. Right? You work for an advertising agency in the creative side of things, and they say, we want this new creative. Come up with new ideas. We're going to test them. We test them, and then they don't work. Now what? Well, first you have to smother your campaign with its pillow, which sucks because everybody likes it, but it doesn't work. So that's where we're at. It's been a little bit stressful, but anyway, we can talk about what we're driving first, and then we'll get into other topics. And Sam, it seems like you're determined to try every flavor of the Volkswagen MQB platform.
I'm working on it. I have actually, over the past week, I've driven many of them. But in particular, we'll start off with VW's two new SUVs. Over the past year, they've launched a pair of new SUVs, a small one, compact one, the second generation Tiguan, and the large one, the Atlas. And I've had both of them back to back. And both of them, interestingly enough, are derived from the MQB platform, which gives you an interesting indication of how flexible that architecture is. That it can span such a wide variety of vehicles. At the low end, VW also uses the MQB for the new Polo, and then it stretches all the way up to the Atlas at the high end, and then the Golf and the Jetta and everything else in between is also on this platform. So this is their front-wheel drive modular, the transverse engine modular platform that covers all these different vehicles.
They have two platforms, MQB and MLB, or
basically, yeah, it's essentially coming down to that. So MLB is the rear drive longitudinal powertrain platform. So that's the one that's being used for the Audis, and actually I think there's three, because I think I don't think the front end, the front drive Audis, I don't think are coming off MLB. I think MLB is for the premium models, like the Panamera, the Cayenne, and then things like the Q7 and the Touareg, I think, are all off the MLB platform. And I think there's another one in between. And Ford is actually following a similar approach. They're going to 5 different flexible architectures: a front drive transverse engine unibody, longitudinal engine unibody, the body on frame for the trucks, the cargo van, the cargo van, unibody cargo van platform for the Transit and Transit Connect and their derivatives, and then the electric vehicle platform, which will be for all the EVs. But what's this time for the Tiguan, VW did something a little different. The first generation Tiguan did okay, but it wasn't a huge success in North America. And so this time around, when they finally redeveloped the Tiguan, the original one was around for 10 years. When they finally redesigned it, they did 2 different versions of it. They've got the standard one, which is what's available in the rest of the world, and it's only about 2 inches longer than the first generation one. And then they've got a long wheelbase version, and if you've been following what car makers tend to do in China, where a lot of Chinese customers, buy cars and then like to have a driver drive them around. So they often prefer long wheelbase versions. So because they're sitting in the back seat, they want the extra leg room. That's what this Tiguan that we have is like. So in North America, we only get the long wheelbase Tiguan, which elsewhere is called the Tiguan Limited.
Oh wait,
the Tiguan Limited is actually the old one.
Right.
It's the Tiguan All Space is what they call, the one that we get. And it's 109.8 inch wheelbase. And when you compare it to the standard Tiguan, it looks the proportions don't look quite right because it's got these long rear doors, so it looks a little funky. But
if you're not comparing it, though, it looks okay.
Yeah, it's okay. But I think the real problem is when you get inside it. And I'm not quite sure why this is. I think it might have to do with the way it's proportioned, where the firewall is relative to the front axle. Because it seems like when you get inside this one, the steering column is at an unusually steep angle. And so the steering wheel, is unusually like that. Well, the instrument cluster and the steering wheel are unusually high when you first get in the vehicle, the default position. And, the steering wheel is adjustable for reach and rake, so you can drop it down. But the problem is if you drop it down to a more comfortable position, so when it's all the way up, it's also kind of a weird angle. It's more like a, almost school bus. It's not quite that extreme, but, it's kind of angled away from you. When you drop it down to a more normal driving position, then it cuts off the top half of the gauges. So
it seems like kind of a amateur mistake.
Yeah, and I'm not sure why it is this way. So I could never really get quite comfortable in this thing. And the seats, for a VW are actually kind of flat. They don't have a whole lot of lateral support. They're kind of wide, flat. And typically, one of the things about VWs that, has always been a positive thing about VWs is they've tended to have nicer, except for the early years of the previous generation Jetta, they typically have had nicer interiors than most cars in their segment. They tended to have a little more premium feel. And this one just doesn't. It feels kind of cheap.
Well,
even though when you touch
it, driving?
It was the SE. It was the mid-level trim.
Yeah.
So it wasn't even the base level. And it's not, it wasn't all hard plastics or anything. It was soft touch plastics on the dash, but it's just something about the way it was executed, sharp edges, just the contours of the dashboard. I don't know. It just didn't feel as premium as I'm used to in a Volkswagen. And then the other thing is the powertrain in this one. It's Volkswagen's 2-liter TSI engine, which is, their 4-cylinder turbocharged gasoline engine. But this is, this basically the same engine that you can find in a Golf R or in an Atlas or any number of other Volkswagen vehicles, 2 liters. For most vehicles, a 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder is usually in the neighborhood of 240 to 250 horsepower.
200.
For some reason, no, not even that. 184.
Oh, that's the one. I think that's the one that's in the last Beetle I drove. I think had that
could be.
Maybe not.
Yeah, I think you're right, or pretty close to it. I mean, VW has a whole range of different power outputs for this engine, and it feels kind of weak. With all-wheel drive, this thing's about 3,500 pounds. It didn't feel good. It wasn't a great place to spend time. It's roomy. It's got lots of room. The standard setup is 2-row. They do offer it with an optional 3rd row, which is kind of a mini 3rd row.
Yeah, that seems kind of like, it seems like automakers have gotten away from that too, where they had been doing the mid-size crossovers or SUVs with that sort of teeny little occasional use 3rd row. And now it's almost come back a little bit, where I was surprised to find that they're doing that with the Tiguan. Like, it just doesn't seem like a big enough vehicle, even with the larger wheelbase. But I guess if you're only going to use it on an occasional basis, it's not a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, the one I had didn't have the third row, so that's fine. Means you have a nice, huge cargo area in the back. The second row seating has lots of leg room. It feels very spacious. And so, it was fine in that respect. It has VW's new corporate 8-inch touchscreen head unit. It's got rotary knobs for volume and tuning. Supports Android Auto and CarPlay. It's a decent enough interface. Nothing objectionable. The screen was easy to see in all lighting conditions, so that was good. But it's just, kind of the driving experience was just really underwhelming for a Volkswagen. My review that I put on Forbes, I described it as too much Tiguan, not enough Volkswagen. But the other one, once I was done with the Tiguan, I swapped that for the Atlas, which is their new larger SUV, which sort of indirectly replaces the Touareg in the US VW lineup. So the new Touareg is no longer available here in North America. Because that was always a more premium vehicle.
Yeah, the Touareg was like, for the people in the know, it was their way to get a Cayenne with sort of some different trimming. And if you bought it as just a regular Volkswagen SUV, you were probably sorely disappointed at one point in your ownership or not. It just like that, like you said, it was sort of more premium. It was complex. It was, expensive, especially for a Volkswagen. And it was a lot of car, not quite the right thing. The Atlas, they kind of did the same thing that they did with the Passat a few years ago. They made it much sort of simpler. Sort of like less expensive to build, and buy, but more in line with, I think, what the volume buyers of the market are looking for too.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, it's right in the heart of the midsize market. Similar in size to a Honda Pilot, Toyota Highlander, Ford Explorer. Right in with all of those.
Styling cribbed directly from a Grand Cherokee.
Yeah, which is not a bad thing. I like the way the Atlas looks.
It's
great.
A good
look. Yeah, it's a great looking vehicle. It's got kind of that, brawny SUV look. It looks like it could go anywhere, even if it can't necessarily, follow a Grand Cherokee
they should
everywhere.
They should send a box of chocolates or something to Ralph Gilles over at FCA.
Yeah. It does have, multiple drive modes. So, there's an off-road mode that's got hill descent control and things like that. So, I think it could handle some basic off-roading, if you're, just have to go, down a little bit of a trail to get to your cabin or something like that. You're not going to take it to Moab or anything like that. But, for basic stuff, it should be fine. And even though it's on the MQB platform, you would never guess that it's in any way related to the Tiguan. It's much bigger. It's much more Volkswagen-like inside. Obviously it's very comfortable. Yeah. Tony Swan and I drove it to Wisconsin for the MAMA Spring Rally. MAMA is the Midwest Automotive Media Association, and they have a big event every spring. They have two, one in the spring, one in the fall. The spring rally is at Road America in Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin. And man, if you have never been to Road America, you got to go there sometime. It's an amazing track. But and they, a whole bunch of automakers bring vehicles out there, and all the members come out, and it's about 90 different vehicles, and we had spent a day and a half, jumping around from one vehicle to another, and we'll talk a little bit more about that afterwards. But so it's about a 400-mile drive, almost 400-mile drive from here, and the Atlas was so much more comfortable to ride in for extended periods. Seats are much more supportive than the ones in the Tiguan. The one I have has the 3.6 liter VR6, which is their narrow angle 6-cylinder engine, and it's about 292 horsepower, I think, or 278 horsepower. It's got plenty of grunt.
Yeah. And what trim level was it?
It was also an SE, so it was the SE with the technology package, and
so that was what did it bring up, about $37,000, something like that.
This was 41.
41. Okay, so it had some options.
Yeah, so it had some, it had, the driver assist stuff. It had adaptive cruise control and lane keeping system, and no sunroof, but it had multi-zone climate control, and actually one thing both the Tiguan and the Atlas both had. The last time I drove a VW a couple of years ago, which was the e-Golf, that one at that time didn't have any USB ports in it. They had one port with a proprietary Volkswagen connector that had an iPhone adapter on it, but this one, the Tiguan and the Atlas both have 4 USB ports, 2 in the front row, 2 in the second row.
Yeah, all of a sudden Volkswagen started deciding to put USBs in their car after being like, no, you can't have them.
Yeah. So that's a good thing. So, it doesn't matter what mobile devices you're using, you can plug them in and get a charge off them, get connected. It has the same audio head unit. So 276 horsepower from the 3.6. Right.
And it's what's funny is that, well, it's got you were talking about that 2-liter turbo in the Tiguan. Well, here in the Atlas, it's a more powerful version. It's 235 horsepower.
Yeah, which even that would probably be acceptable in a front-wheel drive Atlas.
Yeah, and what's interesting to me is that that engine has 258 pound-feet of torque. At like the way that the torque curve of that particular Volkswagen engine goes, it's pretty flat. So you get boost before 2000. You get peak torque before 2000. It just sticks around.
Yeah, it's a typical, turbo direct injection engine.
Yeah, turbos are magic. Whereas the VR6,
they're magic when you combine them with direct injection.
Yes, that's true because they get you can run higher compression, which helps, and all kinds of fancy tricks. The VR6 has just a little bit more. It's only got 266 pound-feet of torque, which like the difference between 258 and 266. No, you can't.
It's not a lot.
Yeah.
So yeah, a 4-cylinder Atlas would probably be fine.
I do think though the difference in horsepower, you will notice that like on ramps and stuff like that. I think that will pay off, but. I'd prefer to have the VR6 just because I've loved that engine since it came out in the 90s because it's just the coolest thing.
Yeah. And it's something that nobody else but Volkswagen builds.
Right.
You can't get them
Lancia
anywhere.
made narrow angle engines back in the day, but yeah, nobody.
Yeah, that was back in the 30s or 40s, I think.
Yeah. And so they don't count.
Yeah.
But yeah,
well, if you can find one, it's going to cost you a whole hell of a lot more money than one of these.
Right, and you may want to haul it with the Volkswagen, but you don't want to put it in the Volkswagen.
Yeah, exactly.
So it was. I'm sure it just felt like a big SUV or big crossover or whatever. They call them SUVs, but we all know that they're not really SUVs.
Yeah, it's a crossover.
And they've really caught on. I see more and more of them around here in the Boston area. And if Boston knows anything, it knows premium SUVs. So I'm starting to see a lot more of them. Apparently, it has the charms to woo buyers.
Yeah, and it's all it's roomy as well. Even the third row seat. I climbed in the third row, and I had headroom to clear. I had clearance for my head and clearance for my knees. The second row seats, you can slide them back and forth almost 8 inches. So if you only got 2 rows, you can push them all the way back and get lots and lots of room. But even when you push them all the way forward, adults can 3 adults can sit across the second row without any problem. And then a couple more in the back seat in the third row. So it's a very usable 3-row utility.
Yeah, and the thing that I guess sort of is telling that they really don't want you to use it as an SUV is its towing capacity it's about 5,000 pounds.
But that's actually not much different from most other utilities in this class. A Highlander or Pilot, they're all in that same range.
That's true. I guess that's not that bad.
The Grand Cherokee is really about the only one that goes much above that.
Yeah, and it doesn't honestly with the Pentastar. It's like 6,500 or something, and you're pushing it at that point. So
yeah, I mean, if you want to tow in a utility this size, you want to get a Hemi Grand Cherokee. That'll tow about 8,000 pounds, I think.
Yeah, and it will use all the gas.
Yep, indeed.
So was this your first? It sounds like this was your first experience with both the Atlas and the Tiguan, and like at least for an extended drive.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't driven either one of these before. I mean, the last time I drove Tiguan was like about 9 years ago, and that was when the first generation one originally came out, and then I haven't driven one since. And as I recall, I wasn't hugely fond of the original Tiguan either. But this one, it was for different reasons that I wasn't terribly fond of it. It was just underwhelming in a lot of ways, but the Atlas I was actually really impressed with, and you can get the Atlas starting at about 31 grand, for the 4-cylinder front drive one. And then the one I had was just shy of 42. It was the R line, which, has all the goodies in there. There's also an SEL premium. So I think totally maxed out, I think you can get it up to around 45.
That's
which again,
very well priced.
Yeah. I mean, it's competitive with the rest of the segment. So, it's much more competitive than the Touareg ever was. Yeah.
Well, and honestly, the Tiguan, the original version of that, part of the issue was they just made it too expensive. It was a Golf.
Yeah.
Look at it, you're like, it's kind of tight.
A tall Golf.
Yeah, it's kind of tight. It's a little expensive. It's not. I don't know. I remember being underwhelmed by that as well. Like, it drove fine. It was just, there wasn't a whole lot to excite you about it. Didn't have that Volkswagen-ness. I'm curious as to why the two different versions of the same thing are that sort of different.
I don't know. I mean. They've clearly changed a lot of things between these two, and I'm not entirely sure, how they managed to, like, some of the things like the steering column position, for example. I'm not quite sure why the Tiguan has such a weird configuration compared to the Atlas. I mean, the Atlas feels much more normal. And the other thing that was really strange, the Tiguan, like so many cars today, has a flat bottom steering wheel, which, is a thing from race cars. They do that in race cars because the steering column is usually very low, and you've got, you don't have a whole lot, you usually have big side bolsters on the racing seats. And so you need that extra clearance just to get in and out. The steering wheel in the Tiguan is so high up that, it looks ridiculous to have a flat bottom steering wheel in there.
Yeah. I gotta say, I don't like the flat bottom steering wheels in pretty much anything because it's hard to juggle. It's got that weird inconsistent shape. So in a race car where you have fast steering and you're not doing 4 turns lock to lock, it's a little different.
Yeah, it all depends on the context.
Yeah, but
last week, I drove some cars with flat bottom steering wheels where it was perfectly normal.
And we will get to that because I want to hear more about that.
All right.
So while you were in Volkswagen land, I drove a proper SUV. I had a Wrangler the JL Jeep Wrangler Unlimited, and it was in Sahara trim. And so this vehicle gets everybody very excited. The Wrangler is an American institution, and for a while looking at the JL, I was kind of underwhelmed, I guess, in the changes. Like, they didn't really change that much. No, they changed a lot. They just did a really, really good job of being consistent. The front styling, I think, is the thing that will tell the tale the most. The headlights are a little bit more recessed into their nacelles now, and there's a bend in the grille that wasn't there before. That was sort of the biggest conversation point, was that kink in the grille. Everything else, it looks like a Wrangler. There's a deeper character.
There's the fender vents too.
Yeah, the fender vents is another way to look. It's good. It's really, really, really good. They have kept the Wrangler-ness. They have refined it quite a bit, where it goes down the road in I guess as a as refined way as it can for what it is. It's never going to be something different than a slightly stiff, anachronistic, hard to get into and out of kind of thing. That's what it's supposed to be. And those things are features. They're not bugs, but in, I guess, general usage, they are bugs. I think about the folks who purchase a Wrangler, and there's some that want those things and legitimately want it to be a Wrangler. There's a large portion of buyers that really just want the image, I think, and the cool factor, right? It's a cool car. People like it.
People like Casey Liss.
But if you had to live with them, which is the same problem with the Wrangler, I mean, it's you have to really carefully consider your priorities, because it's a little tough to live with. And this is the 4-door Wrangler, so you've got buyers.
But on the other hand, it also offers a bunch of stuff that no other vehicle currently available on the market offers.
Yeah,
like the ability to pop all the doors off, pop the roof off, and be more open air than anything else available.
Sure. I mean, that has its allure, I suppose. You're not going to do that like without some work and a good set of Torx bits.
But those come in a kit in the glove box.
Oh, do they? At
least the last Wrangler I drove about a year or so ago. There was a toolkit in the glove box that had all the Torx drivers that you need to take all the pieces off.
Oh, that makes sense. I mean, there was a little pouch in the center console. It was cold and rainy here,
or maybe it was in the center console. I can't remember.
Well, I mean, press car. I'm surprised it was still in there.
Yeah.
But the 4-door Wrangler has that connotation of like, oh, you could use this as your badass family SUV. It's almost like a half-price G-Wagon in that sense, right? Like, it's going to have some of that sort of roughness around the edges.
Well, of course, the CJ, was in many ways the inspiration for the G-Wagon anyway.
Right.
The Jeep, the G-Wagon was designed as a military off-road utility vehicle. And, the definitive version of that is the original, military Jeep, or, in its civilian forms, the various CJs up until they rebadged it as the Wrangler. I mean, that spawned, the Land Rover. It spawned, Toyota's Land Cruisers, countless other, off-road type vehicles. So, all of those vehicles owe their existence to the Jeep.
Yeah, and I can see the charm. I can see the allure. What I can't see is actually trying to just jam this thing into your life without seriously understanding what it means. So I did this on purpose, and I apologize to my family, but we went down about 100 miles away. We went down and met some family for Memorial Day weekend. And so I had both kids who are 10 and 12, and the dog jammed in between them, and then, me and my wife in the front. So we had all the seating positions filled. And the cargo space is good. It's a nice square box behind that second row. And we weren't going for overnights or anything like that. So it was kind of lightly loaded, but it gets to be a bit much taking this on a jaunt like that with it sort of fully loaded, and you're just going to go on like a highway ride or something. It's really not in its element there. Like where people want an SUV or a crossover to perform well, the Wrangler doesn't, because it's not supposed to. So, using it in that context, it's like it's this fish out of water thing. And I feel like its popularity is almost set up to bite it in the end, because it's going to be used in the wrong situation. And maybe I'm overthinking it, and people are just going to put the top down, drive around town and love it.
Yeah, I mean, it's very much a lifestyle vehicle, and I actually had a chance to drive one, take a short drive in one last week as well, when I was at the rally, and if it fits your lifestyle, I think, it can be a great choice. But I agree. You do have to consider very carefully before you buy something like this. Casey, has talked about getting a Wrangler to replace his BMW. But his commute is like 2.5 miles.
Yeah, well, I told him to get a bicycle.
Yeah, which is probably would make more sense. But then again, if you own a BMW 3 Series, and you're thinking about a Wrangler, you would never do something as rational as ride a bike. So
bikers are obstacles.
What's that?
Bikers are obstacles.
Yeah. So I think that if it's something that fits your lifestyle, I think if you're going to be regularly taking 100-mile trips, get a Grand Cherokee. Right. If you want a Jeep, you don't want a Wrangler. But if most of your driving is shorter trips around town, and really, if you do plan to go off-roading, if you've got some sand dunes somewhere, or you're going to go out to Moab a couple times a year, like one of my neighbors, he's got a big RV, and he's got a big old, he's got an old CJ that, is all lifted up and, modified, and he tows that thing with the Winnebago out to Utah a couple times a year, and, goes to other places. That's what this thing is built for. If you're going to drive on the beach, it's great for that. The tiny, the almost non-existent overhangs on this thing mean you've got crazy, approach and departure angles, which is what you need for off-roading. It's got plenty of ground clearance, so you're not going to, bottom it out. So, that's what it's for. But, and apparently there's enough people, a significant proportion of the population that seems to think it's a good fit in their lifestyle. I'm not one of those people. Yeah. But, if it works for you, go for it.
Well, I mean, I think the promise of a Wrangler is that it's truly ready for anything. And that may or may not be true, but
well, I mean, it can handle anything. How well and how refined it handles it is an entirely different story. I mean, it handled your 100-mile drive.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. It absolutely can do it. It's just not, and this was just the soft top too. I think with the hard top, it's a little bit quieter inside, which makes it a little nicer for that sort of thing. I still keep waiting for them to make like an overland version or something, with a little bit more sound editing, a little bit more luxury. And they haven't yet. And I'm surprised that they haven't, given Jeep's sort of ability to sort of mine every last.
Well, I mean, Jeep's got a big enough lineup now. I mean, it was one thing when you only had the Wrangler, and the original Cherokee. Now, you've got the Grand Cherokee, you've got the Compass, you've got the Renegade, and soon probably, something bigger than the Grand Cherokee. There's enough other options. Although, at some point they may well do something like the Overland. And I think, for some people, that'd be the right choice. And the thing is, I say, if you are going to go off road, nothing is going to handle as much stuff as a Wrangler will.
Oh yeah. I was really, really impressed with this. I have no complaints about the vehicle itself. It was more of like just examining sort of how it's used versus how you think it's going to be used, right? Again, it did everything with no complaints. It just is what it is, and you have to understand what it is. It'll do 90 miles an hour, no complaints. The Pentastar and the 8-speed automatic are real happy to do that for you. And it returned to almost 24 miles per gallon in that highway, John. It was like 23.5 or 20.
That's better than the Atlas did. Yeah, the Atlas is only 22.
And it has stop start to save fuel in sort of around town driving. Everything is really well done. The materials are great. The design is fantastic. It's really well thought out. It is,
and you can still fold down the windshield.
Yeah, it's an impressive vehicle. FCA knows how important it is to them, and they did an excellent job redesigning the Wrangler and keeping the flavor where it's noticeably refined compared to the JK, which, especially when the JK first came out, it had some rough edges. They've left the right amount of of roughness in here and just cleaned everything else up. It's a really, really good Wrangler. Don't get me wrong. I have no complaints about it. And
right. And you know, they've also done some stuff, you know, to improve it in other ways as well. Like, you know, removing the doors. It's now a lot easier to remove the doors than it was before. You know, and there's one connector, you know, when you take the doors off, there's one connector to unplug, you know, like for the power windows and mirrors or power windows and locks and stuff like that. You know, they've simplified a lot of those things, you know, so if you want to use these other capabilities it has, you know, then, it's got you covered.
Yeah. And
plus, you know, it has more Easter eggs in it than any other car on the market, I think.
And I didn't find a ton. I found more Easter eggs, I think, in the Renegade, but I guess I was looking for them too. And the Renegade has kind of an identity crisis. It's like, no, really, I'm a Jeep. I'm a Jeep. Really, I am. I think that the most brilliant thing about the JL is the way that they've managed to update it for crash safety standards and still maintain that Jeepness. Everybody was worried about that. And, you know, it does have an integral kind of roll cage now that there's a structure that's there regardless of what you do with the tops. And
well, that was there before.
Yeah, it's just like it's beefier now, and it's just it's almost like more integrated, more part of the car. It's got a little bit more of a, I guess, an exoskeleton feel to it. I don't know. And the fold down windshield, the way it's like a door where there's two layers to it, and so you fold down the windshield and there's still that frame there. I was really impressed with that. And maybe I didn't spend enough time with the JK to just go, oh yeah, it's just a very good update of what was already there. But
well, from the brief drive I had, you know, it was definitely way more refined than the last JK I drove. And you know, I'm just as you're talking, I'm looking through the Jeep website, and I noticed the subwoofer in the back is mounted in the floor of the cargo area, and it's got the 7-bar grill embossed in the speaker grill.
Yeah, they do a lot of sort of interesting little touches like that. And I mean, they know their market. And the biggest sort of complaint, I guess actual complaint I can work up about it is that it equipped this way as the Sahara
they're not inexpensive
without a hard top. So this is just a soft top. It was the Sunrider top, which is nice. You know, it's easy to use. You can fold back the first couple, you know, seating positions worth, and then you have to go through the trouble of actually folding it down otherwise. It's $48,000. Like, yeah,
it's a lot. It's pricey.
And I mean, at least it hangs on to its value, but that's a lot of dough for a Jeep. It's like a half-price G-Wagon, but it's a lot of money for a Jeep.
Well, I mean, if you look at it from that perspective, then it's a great value.
We'll call it a J-Wagon. I mean, I can't. What else can you do but just say, you know, the Jeep continues to be an amazing juggernaut, and kind of leave it at that.
Yep, absolutely.
So, all right. Well, you had mentioned that you were driving some fancy flat-bottom steering wheel cars. So, why don't we talk about the Mama Spring Rally? We teased it enough. We should just talk about it.
Yeah. So, Tony Swan and I drove out there together. Tony, ex of Car and Driver and Motor Trend and many other publications over the years. You know, I've been reading Tony's work for way too many years. When we got out there for the rally, you know, some really impressive collection of cars available, and you know, some of them, you know, probably about 25 or 30 of them were available to drive on the track at Road America, and the rest were set up just for street drives on a loop around the outside of the track. Two of the cars that I drove on the track were interesting, and you know, our friend Casey will be interested to hear this, because in addition to the Wrangler, you know, the other car that he's expressed interest in, even though I've suggested to him that he would be better off with a Civic Type R, is the VW Golf R. And VW had both the Golf R and the GTI on hand at the rally, and I actually drove the two of them back to back on the track. You know, took a lap in each one of them, and you know, I like the GTI a lot better than the Golf R.
I can understand that. I mean, the Golf R definitely has the additional power and probably a little bit more handling sharpness, but I don't think it's worth it. I think the GTI is a better all-arounder.
Yeah, I mean, the Golf R has all-wheel drive. Both of them were manual transmissions. The R has all-wheel drive. It's got more power. It's 292 horsepower, I think, versus like 220 in the GTI. But the Golf R, is heavier, but it felt so buttoned down, that it just kind of just went effortlessly wherever I pointed it. We they didn't record lap times or anything. We were encouraged to stay below our limits, so we didn't break anything. But it just didn't feel as much fun to drive. Whereas the GTI, you take that thing out on the track and you can fling it around. It felt more responsive. You could feel it moving around a little bit under you, and you could play with it, as you approached its limits, without getting into trouble. And it felt more alive. And if Casey's still considering one of these, I would definitely recommend that he take a look at the GTI as an alternative to the Golf R. Even though it is front wheel drive, it was still a blast to drive. Modern higher powered front wheel drive cars are so much better than they were 10, 15, 20 years ago. That I used to refer to front wheel drive cars as wrong wheel drive. But modern front wheel drive cars can be just as good as a rear drive car if they're done right.
You sound like a Lotus press release around 1990. Kind of. This is Sam, the M100 version of Sam.
Yeah. Having done some work on that car, I'm familiar with that. But yeah, no, I think. And it's so much better priced. And, what I've said in the past about, VWs being better cars to drive than to own. I'm not so sure that's even valid anymore because, now VW's got a 6-year, 72,000 mile bumper to bumper warranty. So at least for the first 6 years, whatever goes wrong, you're going to be covered. So I don't think you even really need to worry about, kind of the foibles of VW ownership that have afflicted my family in the, over the past 15 years. I'd say, it's definitely worth taking a look at one of those.
Well, yeah, I mean, the one thing that I have found that to sort of temper that enthusiasm for the warranty is dealer treachery that will sort of push those actual issues off. They seem to not want to really address things unless they really have to. Sometimes from some reports that I've gotten, and it's not just Volkswagen. It's just
I mean that sort of thing applies to dealers of any brand, and that's going to vary depending on where you are. And sometimes you may just have to look at finding a different dealer to work with. Certainly. If you're in a major urban area, that you probably got a choice of multiple VW dealers to go with, and it's worth shopping around, or check with other owners and see what their experiences were, because it's definitely worth taking a look at. I liked it a lot.
Yeah, I love the GTI. I think it's one of those cars that gets recommended a lot by auto writers, where we get to drive a lot of cars, and we don't like the GTI as sort of like a cult thing or like an in-crowd kind of thing. It gets recommended a lot.
It's a genuinely good car.
It's good at its mission, where it's fun to drive, it's super practical, it's really well thought out. It's a good car. And it's hard to argue with that.
Yeah, absolutely. One car that I unfortunately did not get a chance to drive, but I did ride shotgun. I got a chance to ride shotgun along with a Ford engineer in a Ford GT. My first time in the GT, and was that something? It was unbelievable. It
sounded awesome.
Yeah, I mean, that truly is a race car for the street. And clearly, when Ford was putting together that program, the whole goal was to take it to Le Mans and win the GT class. And they did that first time out. The whole car is clearly designed around the aerodynamics they needed to optimize for a race car, that could run at, 220 miles an hour down the Mulsanne Straight. Road America is about a 4-mile long track. And this car was running from 9 in the morning till 4:30 in the afternoon continuously, except for a 1-hour lunch break. And then every hour they had to pop into the gas station to fill up the tank. But other than that, it was running continuously, running just over 2-minute laps around Road America. So, averaging about 120 miles an hour.
Yeah. When you told me that, I was like, wait. That's 120 mile an hour average speed. I was like, I suck at math, but is that right?
Yeah, that's right. That's good. They ran 70 laps, from morning till afternoon, without a problem, all in the same set of tires. All they had to do is just keep putting gas in it, and they put lots of gas in it. On
the same set of tires, you're running that pace. So that almost says like it wasn't working that hard.
Yeah, no. Because it wasn't race conditions. They weren't timing it. They wanted to keep it running all day to make sure that, everybody had a chance to ride in it that wanted to. And, so, they were clearly running it below its limits, but it was still running incredibly fast. You got to keep in mind that, the production car with, 650 horsepower, it's actually running probably about 100 to 120 horsepower more than the race car, because, the race cars, at Le Mans, and, other sports car series, they're subjected to balance of performance, because you have so many different configurations of cars with different engines. And so, what they do is they make adjustments to the amount of boost they're allowed to run, the amount of weight they carry, and a couple other things, in order to get them, roughly comparable performance. And so GT Le Mans cars are running somewhere in the neighborhood of 530 to 550 horsepower typically. And so, this production car has 100 horsepower more. Granted, it's heavier, 2 people in it, and all the production equipment, but still, it's probably capable of running nearly as fast as the race car. And it's just, it was amazing. And we'll include a video. My friend Harvey Briggs actually recorded video. He mounted a GoPro on the roof for his lap. And so we've got a video of a full lap of Road America in this car. And this was at the end of the day. And you can see from the time clock on there that it ran just over 2 minutes, about 2 minutes and I think 7 or 8 seconds for that lap. And it's a pretty amazing experience. If you ever get a chance to ride in a Ford GT, you got to go for it.
Yeah, I can see how that would be a thing that everyone must experience at least once. Just gotta. It's like if you're going to Disney World, you have to ride Space Mountain or whatever the thing is now. But when I went, it was Space Mountain. So.
Yep. Let's see what else was there that was particularly interesting. Oh, got to try out the new BMW M5. It was its first North American appearance. It's the brand new one with all-wheel drive, and I think close to 600 horsepower now. No manual transmission available anymore, but this thing, it's just crazy acceleration, sub 3 seconds, 0 to 60, and it sounds so good.
But see, the M5, the existence of the M550i, I'm not sure if, again, it's like a GTI Golf R situation where the M5 is probably too much for most people.
On the street, it probably is. But if you're going to take it to the track, which, granted, almost nobody's going to do with an M5. But if you're going to take it to the track, it's probably a faster car on the track.
Oh, yeah, I hope so.
Yeah.
Given the price differential.
But what was actually the most surprising car of the whole day for me?
Nissan Versa.
No, there was no Nissan Versa there.
I think there should be a spec Versa series. Quite honestly, I think that would be a good use of that car.
Why not? What could go wrong?
A figure 8.
Yeah. No, the most surprising car of the day was the Lexus LC 500. You know, I don't know if you remember when I drove it last fall and I talked about it. You know, I described it, you know, as an amazing grand touring car. You know, kind of in the vein of, you know, like the old Ferrari Daytonas. You know, it's not the ultimate sports car. You know, not a hypercar like the GT, you know, or even an Acura NSX, but, you know, a great luxury grand tourer. You know, very powerful, very fast, beautiful outside, beautiful inside, very comfortable. But all of us that drove that thing were so shocked at how good it was on the track too. You know, that 5-liter V8, you know, the way they've done the exhaust, it sounds so good.
Oh yeah, that's a good
and
one.
it for a car that weighs 2 tons, it handles shockingly good as well. You know, it's got big brakes, you know, so it hauls down speed, you know, as you're going into corners. And it's just so much fun to drive. And I was amazed at how good it was on the track.
Well, I think that's, you know, Lexus and Toyota meant it when they said, like, hey, we're going to make our cars, you know, more passionate to drive, you know, just more enjoyable for an enthusiast. And, you know, we all kind of shrugged and were like, yeah, okay, whatever. But I think they were actually really delivering, and not just because of the LC or experience with the LC, but, you know, I've had that same kind of surprise in just some regular Toyotas lately.
Yeah, even in a Camry.
Yeah. So I guess they really do mean it. And
yeah, I mean, they clearly infused a lot of LFA DNA into the LC.
And I mean, the LC looks so good too. Like that, that is a really great car. And I don't know that it gets mentioned enough because it's been out for a little while too. And I just, you know,
about a year.
Yeah. I mean, there's that normal, like, sort of curve of, it's like a bell curve, right? Of awareness. Maybe it hasn't come up to the sort of the top of the curve yet, where other cars get up there a lot quicker. So, it's sort of still like a little bit of a undiscovered pearl.
Yeah. And speaking of pearls or cars that might one day be pearls, is the Corolla hatchback, the new Corolla hatchback, which, you know, it's funny. I guess I wasn't at the press launch of it, but from people I talked to that were there, you know, they said Toyota was describing it as their new hot hatch. Which, you know, might be stretching it a little bit. You know, I actually liked, you know, its predecessor, the IM, you know, which was based on the European market, Urus.
Yeah, I kind of liked that car. The problem that car had was that it wasn't a Golf.
Yeah.
You know, and that was why I asked you the other day. I said, wait a second, is this just an update? Because it doesn't look all that different than the IM, but it's the TNGA platform. So
yeah, it's the new platform. You know, I mean, when you look at it up close, I mean, there's no shared bodywork or anything. It's completely new, which is good. You know, and it's good in a lot of ways. Dynamically, it's quite good. You know, the platform, the chassis is good, handles and rides well. I think, you know, the major issue with it is it just doesn't have quite enough power, quite enough brakes. You know, I think the best description, you know, from various people was just that it needs a TRD package. You know, it needs to have TRD take a look at it and have some fun with it, because it's, you know, it just needs a little more oomph. You know, I think it's got the 1.8 liter 4-cylinder in there, which is fine. You know, especially with the 6-speed manual. You know, but it's just, you know, it's not going to compete with a GTI, you know, or, you know, an Focus ST or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, Toyota they'll generally do that too. They'll sort of underwhelm on engines and sort of make it up in other areas, either, you know, features or just the reputation for build quality, that kind of stuff. So, I mean, you know that if you want that trouble-free GTI and you are still worried even with Volkswagen's warranty, like we were talking about, you could probably rest a lot easier if you get the Corolla hatch, and it'll be sort of close to the same kind of experience ish.
Actually, I'm looking at the specs. It's actually a 2-liter 4-cylinder, and it's 168 horsepower, which is kind of where it falls down. It doesn't have quite enough to really compete with the likes of the hotter hatches.
And that's naturally aspirated.
It's naturally aspirated, yeah.
Yeah. So like that's sort of the issue right there, because that's not bad power for a naturally aspirated 2-liter. That's decent.
It's a little on the low side for contemporary 2 liters, but it's in the ballpark. But certainly more so for mainstream models, not so much for the performance models.
Yeah.
That's where it kind of falls down. One thing that was interesting, you can get it with a CVT, although why would you want to?
But so Toyota's new CVT is really interesting though, because it's actually got there is a gear in there. So
yeah, there's a gear for the first gear launch, and then it shifts over to the CVT.
And they put out a press release that goes through it. They really did make a whole bunch of refinements in the CVT. So I haven't driven a car with that new Toyota CVT in it, but it's probably a lot better than the sort of rubber bandiness that we're all imagining.
Yeah. Well, the one I drove had the 6-speed manual, which actually has rev matching capability as well. So, if you want to drive quickly and you're not quite as refined with your shift work, or your clutch work, then, it'll help you out a little bit and, get everything matched up as you shift into each gear.
Yeah, and given the amount of people that know how to drive a manual, I think that...
for all 3 or 4 of us,
right. Whatever the car can do to sort of help it along and make it seem fun, as long as they keep manuals around, okay, I'm all right with that. As long as you can shut it off. Can you shut it off?
Yes, you can. There is a switch to shut it off.
Good.
And I only had a few minutes to drive it, so I left it on just to see, how it performed, and it did great. This is no problem at all. And you can actually, the hatch is available in SE and XSE trims, and you can get the manual transmission on either one. So you get choice of CVT or manual with either trim level. And the one I drove was the XSE.
Well, see, that's good, because a lot of times too, you get the manual and you get locked out of the higher trim, which, it's not. It's sort of priced as this like loss leader at that point, and so they don't give it to you in the trim you actually want. Subaru does this, where you can't get the nicer Impreza with the manual. You're stuck.
Unless you step up to an STI or WRX.
WRX.
Yeah.
Which I had a WRX last week, and it had some weirdness going on with the manual where I couldn't quite shift it. Unless I shifted like a punk, I couldn't shift it all that smooth. So I don't know what was up with that. Maybe it was just me not.
Maybe a bad synchro or something.
And it wasn't notchy like that. It was just like it was really responsive to the throttle, almost like it was already blipping the throttle. And I don't know. I did eventually sort of come to terms with it, and that's a car that makes you an aggressive driver.
Yeah,
it really supports heel and toe shifting and all kinds of stuff, and it's got a good bit of power to it. So, yeah, it's been a good couple weeks. So, like, what else? What was the most? I guess what was the most sort of underwhelming thing you drove there?
Let's see. Well, the new Mitsubishi Eclipse Cross was way better than I expected it to be.
Mitsubishis never really drive bad. They just.
Some of them have.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure. There is the Mirage.
Yeah.
But in general, like, I don't know. They always drive okay. Or at least in my mind, I can expect them to be fairly disciplined. It's just you look around and you're like, okay, guys, when are you going to start trying?
Yeah.
But
no, the Eclipse Cross was actually better than I expected it to be. So it was pretty decent. It was, it wasn't anything that's going to get your blood boiling, but
at least not in a particular enthusiast way.
Right. Yeah. But aside from that, it did fine. It was a nice little compact crossover. It was pleasant enough. Definitely, improved interior from the last couple of Mitsubishis I've driven. So they're making progress, and I think hopefully now, with the guidance of Nissan and Renault, we'll continue to see some more progress from Mitsubishi with their new models going forward.
Well, yeah, I mean, if there's a thing they need, it's investment. And I mean, they know how to build cars, and they build cars pretty decently to a price, you know? So I think that it's a really, it's sort of a good matchup for them to be part of Nissan Renault and see where they can take it. And they put Carlos on that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's chairman. And then, you know, if you're really considering a Mini, you know, just get the Mini hardtop. John Cooper works, and, you know, don't bother with any other ones. You know, that's the one to have. I mean, that's the true Mini. The 3-door hatch, you know, with the John Cooper Works package. Just go for that. I drove that on the track, and it was absolutely lovely.
I mean, there's something to be said for that classic recipe, right? Like it's why you try the vanilla ice cream first. If they can't do that well, they can't do anything else well. Or they're just covering it up with something else. So so that one was good. There was really nothing that was too terribly disappointing. You know, I mean, I tried to stick to the cars that I haven't driven before, you know, so I've passed on cars like the Stinger and the Jaguar F-Pace, tried out the E-Pace, their new small crossover, and the Volvo XC40, both very nice. You know, again, very short drives in those, you know, so when I get a chance to spend more time with those, we'll come back to those, have a longer discussion about those. But overall, it was, you know, excellent day and a half. The new Jetta sedan was also quite impressive. It's another, they've gone, you know, unlike the last generation where they did a dedicated Jetta platform, you know, their new NMC, I think they called it. It was fine, but, you know, it was, especially the first couple of years when it had a twist beam axle, it was not particularly impressive. But the new one is on the MQB and drives much, much better and has a much nicer interior than the last Jetta. Yeah, well, you know, and the twist beam axle thing is like, it was fine.
I think the bigger issue that with the last Jetta was more the interior.
It was cheap.
It was very cheap feeling, especially for Volkswagen. You know, like I said, you know, Volkswagens had developed a reputation for having a comparatively premium feeling interior. I mean, certainly both of the Jetta, the 2010 Jetta wagon we had, and the Passat before that, you know, both felt much more like Audis. You know, and it would, you know, if you could have swapped, you know, the VW badge for an Audi badge on either one of those, and it would have felt perfectly appropriate. But the last generation Jetta, you know, did not feel that way, and this new one is definitely much better.
Yeah, I mean, they sort of lost their mojo for a little while, and then they nearly tanked the company with trickery. So they've got to really get it back together. So. I expect more and better Volkswagens for the near future. That's my prediction.
Yeah, I think we can expect some good stuff, you know, and I hopefully, you know, with this new warranty that they have, you know, and, you know, you mentioned, you know, having different dealers treat you differently. The nice thing about warranty work is you don't have to go to the dealer where you bought it. You can take it to any dealer and have the work done, you know, because they all get paid by the factory. It doesn't matter who does it. You know, whoever does the work gets paid. So, you know, I think, you know, hopefully the reliability issues that I experienced and that many VW owners have experienced in the past are something of the past. So, you know, I feel much more comfortable, you know, recommending one of those now than I would have a year ago.
Huh. A change of heart.
Yeah. Just don't get the Tiguan.
Right. Well, you know what? And if we want to really delve into some disappointment, we can talk about Edmund's experience with the Tesla Model 3.
Which
sounds like they gave it their sort of normal, well-considered test, and it came up short in several areas.
Yeah, well, when, you know, for Edmunds, you know, like Consumer Reports, you know, when they get long-term review vehicles, they actually go out and buy one. So they went ordered one, paid money for it, just like Consumer Reports does. They did not get a press loaner from Tesla, and they did this previously with the Model S as well, and I think with the X. So they're 3 months into their long-term, their year-long review of the Model 3, and they just published their monthly update for April. And, they're having a lot of problems with this car. They spent $56,000 on it.
That's not as expensive as I thought it might be.
Well, I mean, that's, towards the low end of what you can get right now. I mean, I think the cheapest one you can actually buy right now is $49,000. So that's not a whole lot of options on there. And then of course, if you order I think since the last time we recorded, they announced the dual motor and performance versions. And, if you go whole hog, get the performance dual motor version, it's going to cost you like $84,000. Which is a little bit more than $35,000.
Yeah, where's the $35,000 version that they were promising?
Don't expect to see one of those anytime soon.
Well, the answer was like, we've got to get 5 to 6 months of smooth production of 5,000 cars per month going before we can profitably make that $35,000 one. So we're going to sell you the expensive one for now.
Yeah. Well, Elon has promised that Tesla will be profitable in this third and fourth quarters of this year, and the only way they can even remotely hope to do that is to sell as many
that's what I was just going to
$70,000 to $80,000 Model 3s as they can.
Oh, I was going to say they must be selling pollution credits.
Well, that too. But they'll probably be selling a lot of ZEV credits. But the high end Model 3s are the key for them right now. They're going to push those as hard as they can, and they're not even going to take any orders for low end versions for the foreseeable, probably until the end of the year at the earliest.
So here's what I don't understand is haven't they managed to make the Model S profitable by now?
No. Well, that would require, actually building it right the first time, having it operate reliably once you deliver it to customers so that you're not constantly doing warranty work on it, which so far is something they have not managed to achieve with either the S or the X.
Because, that thing's been around for a while.
5 years.
Yeah. So it's at a certain point, you got to know how to make them. And
you would think so.
Yeah.
I just, earlier this afternoon, I had a long conversation with Ed Niedermeyer, and he's working on a story for the Daily Beast that should be out in the next day or so about Tesla. And we talked about some of this stuff. But, basically, Tesla, just has not really been able to come to grips with the whole concept of build it right the first time. If you're going to make money in the car business, and few people make the kinds of margins that companies like Apple or Google are comfortable with in their business lines. Porsche is about the most profitable car maker there is, and their net margins are about 20%. Most car makers are in the single digits, in the anywhere from 6 to 9% profit margins. Tesla, has never been profitable on building cars. So, but in order to become profitable, you have to build vehicles consistently, right the first time, not have to spend a whole lot of money on warranty work, on rework, you've got cars have to come off the line working properly and, ready for delivery to customers, not having to spend days or weeks going through rework, manual rework to get them right. And, even with all the rework, we're talking to Ed, he was saying that the figure he's heard from some folks he's talked to at Tesla is something like 90% of the cars, Model 3s coming off the line, are requiring some level of rework after they come off the assembly line, which is that's just not acceptable. You cannot make money doing that, no matter, well, I guess if you got a high enough price for them, you could, but the kinds of things that Edmunds has been seeing on their car, they've had a variety of electrical glitches, mechanical glitches. Like, for example, the radio will just randomly turn itself on and crank itself up to maximum volume for no apparent reason.
It must be a really good song.
I guess.
Listen, Smoke on the Water's on.
Sometimes the backup camera screen doesn't appear. The nav screen going haywire, zooming, scrolling, pinching, pixelating all at once. Oh boy, that must be fun to see.
See, like these are the things that the legacy, if we want to put that in air quotes, but established automakers, I guess. This is why stuff takes a while to get to market. This is why some of the tech seems like it's, not cutting edge, because it has to not do that stuff. Like it has to work in all conditions and temperatures and for years.
Yeah, and this is something that Tesla has still not managed to achieve. Another issue they had was that one time the car would not shift into drive or reverse upon startup. It says the vehicle systems are powering up, shift into drive or reverse after message clears. Have to wait for it to power up. Loud click comes from the rear as if a drive shaft is engaging, and the message on the screen goes away, but nothing happens. And then it comes up and says, cannot maintain vehicle power. Car may stop driving or shut down. No shutdowns yet, but keeping an eye out. It's just another one they had, at 170 miles of range, the car displays a regenerative braking limited message. Never figured out what that one was. So, I mean, there's all kinds of, one of the problems with relying on software so much to control all this stuff is that you're relying on software that might be buggy. And, Tesla, even though they ship regular software updates, they still have a lot of bugs in their software. They ship software updates frequently because they have to. Most cars work fine for their entire lives with few, if any, software updates during their lifetime. And, Teslas just are incapable of doing that. You know what I hate? I hate software updates because it breaks stuff. You have the unintended consequences. We've got, workstations that run, various versions of Avid or the Adobe Creative Suite. And when you update stuff that's unrelated, sometimes you'll update Mac OS, for example. Mm-hmm. Then stuff doesn't work. And you're like, why can't I make a QuickTime? Oh, because the codecs were updated. And, right. It's, something seemingly trivial like those codecs, that's why a lot of, video production shops, they'll be running, OS versions that are several versions old because they can't risk, those updates breaking something. Yep. For years, one of the studios I worked at, we had an Avid that was an online editing machine. So it was a standard def, and you would go from your offline back in the day, which was heavily compressed, and you would take your tapes and you would redigitize into the machine with the time code that was on the tapes at uncompressed resolution. You'd color correct on the way in. So that Avid, that set of hardware was it was OS 9 point whatever, and that version of Avid never fully ran on OS 10, although they said it did, but it didn't. And so for a decade, we kept this thing alive to run our online suite on OS 9. And it just got to be the point where it was you can't even get parts for it. There's we couldn't get the right programs to actually send the shows, digitally or stuff, the software just isn't there for an older OS. So, those are the things you have to do to maintain reliability. And you can't always be on the cutting edge. You just break stuff that's critical. And in a car, I can't imagine. It's not like we missed, the satellite window for uploading the show to PBS. In a car, it's the brakes don't work, for example. Speaking of brakes not working, right? Consumer Reports, they tested their Model 3 that they bought, and they had some issues with it, particularly with they complained about the poor ride quality, which others have also complained about. But they also had issues with their brakes. They said on the first stop, first 60 mile an hour to zero stop, they it did about 132, 133 feet, I think, which is roughly around what Tesla quotes. But then on all their subsequent stops, their stopping distance got significantly longer, to over 150 feet. I think, it averaged about 152 feet, which is longer than the stopping distance for a Ford F-150. Which, in a car like that is not very good, they declined to recommend the Model 3 because of some of the various issues that they experienced during their initial evaluation. And since they bought the car, they're going to keep it around for a year and continue testing it. But they complained about this, and then of course Elon Musk, being Elon, this is one of the most thin-skinned people you'll ever meet. He does not like criticism at all, which we'll get to more in a minute. And, he said that, no, this is not wrong. This doesn't match the results we've gotten. But actually, it was comparable to the results that Car and Driver got when they tested the Model 3. They had the same kind of issue where they had a short stopping distance initially and then longer after that. And I think, one possible explanation, and this is purely speculative on my part, having worked on brake systems for,
Sam, you don't know what you're talking
years.
about. You did conventional car braking systems.
That's right. Which have calipers with brake pads that clamp on rotors.
The physics are different in Tesla land.
Nope, physics is physics, and if anybody should know that, it's Elon Musk, who has a degree in physics, not in mechanical engineering. But one possible explanation of this, is, one of the things you'll find, on a lot of electrified vehicles, because they have regenerative braking, which puts less load on the friction brakes. A lot of times manufacturers will put, maybe less friction brake on the car than they otherwise would, still enough, to meet the minimum safety requirements, but which are actually, relatively lax, but, not as much as they might otherwise do if they were relying only on the friction brakes. So what possibly happened here is that on the first stop, the brakes got very hot, which can be the case from 60 miles an hour, and it may have actually glazed the brake pads and the rotors. In which case, what happens, when your brake pads get too hot, you actually get a chemical change that occurs in the surface of the brake pad, and the amount of friction that's available decreases pretty significantly. And so what happens is, when you do that, next time you hit the brakes, even if you let them cool down first, because there's actually a chemical change happening here, you end up having to apply a lot more force to get the same amount, a lot more pedal force to get the same amount of braking force. And over time, as under normal driving, over time, that surface layer that got glazed will eventually wear off and the braking performance will improve again. You can also fix that by burnishing the brake pads. You go out and you do a series of stops, or decelerations and then, letting the brakes cool down, and you'll wear off that surface glaze. But that may be what happened here. But of course, Elon responded, but we're going to fix it with an over-the-air software update, which apparently started rolling out over the weekend, and almost immediately, some Model 3 owners, at least one Model 3 owner I saw, started tweeting that he got the software update and then went out and drove, and the car was pulling one way and the other and doing all kinds of weird stuff. So this is why you have to test this stuff, especially for safety critical systems like brakes. You need to do a lot more testing and validation before you ship software updates. You can't just ship out a software update and expect it to work right away the first time.
Yeah, that seems awfully fast, even just working at a breakneck pace. We whipped up the software. It's almost like they changed a few parameters and we're like, yeah, it ought to work. It's just shot it out versus actually testing it and seeing so. Not knowing what's going on, I don't want to sort of just riff too much on it and get ourselves in trouble, although we're probably already there. But I mean, the Model 3, say what you will about the automotive press, but in general, Car and Driver, certainly they write for enthusiasts, but their testing is fairly robust. They'll be willing to show you their numbers. They put the numbers in the magazine. You can even, I think you can still look at the testing sheets online. So the actual
all that stuff is published.
Right. So you say what you will about whatever they do with the numbers, but the numbers are there. They have smart guys doing the testing. They have designed pretty rigorous regimes. They're not just sort of half-assing it. You know, they're not like just some guys with a blog. Like they've been at it a while and they've established their credibility. And so they're not going to just throw it away just to ding the Tesla. If the thing doesn't work that well, I think too, they want to be the first ones to say, this is awesome. If it is, you know?
Yeah.
And so they're not going to just ding it to ding it. And Consumer Reports, certainly, they don't have a reputation as an enthusiast magazine. That's not really who reads them. But they have solid results over however many decades they've been doing it. Like they're a respected outlet for what they do for a reason, and it goes beyond just cars too. You know, you can trust Consumer Reports for the most part if you're looking for anything as a consumer. And they're not going to throw that away just to have some vendetta against a single company that may or may not be here in a couple of years. You know, like this is not the first automaker Consumer Reports has seen come and go.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. And of course, you know, Elon, you know, being someone that doesn't like criticism from any corners, you know, and he has lashed out at me in the past. You know, over the past week, you know, he's gone on a Twitter rant. You know, basically he's gone full Donald Trump. You know, accusing, you know, all the media that, you know, is critical of him of, you know, promulgating fake news. And, you know, he talked about creating a website, you know, where people could rate the credibility of news outlets, you know, calling it Pravda, which was the old communist newspaper in Russia during the Soviet times. And, you know, I mean, he's being absolutely ridiculous. But what's even worse is that a lot of his fanboys are, you know, they're very much, you know, like the bro culture, you know, Silicon Valley bro culture. And, you know, what we're seeing now, you know, over the last several days, you know, Elon himself has lashed out at several females online, female reporters. And his followers on Twitter have really been going all out. You know, it's very much like, you know, a couple of years ago during the whole Gamergate thing and you know, during Me Too. So, you know, we're seeing, you know, these assholes online, you know, going on Twitter. And, you know, there was a story that was published on the Daily Beast today by Aaron Beebe, you know, about how women are being treated by Elon Musk's followers online. And it's outrageous, you know, and I just want to say that, you know, if you're listening to this and you are one of those people that, you know, is using all kinds of derogatory terms against women like that, just shut the fuck up, you know.
Wow.
Get the hell offline. We don't need you.
But
you know,
no,
the world
that's
does not
true.
need you.
Like, it's,
you know, and frankly, you know, if Elon wants to colonize Mars, I think he should start by taking all of you guys to Mars.
It's this particularly virulent strain of boosterism or fandom. I don't know exactly what it is. And I don't know where people get so sort of thin-skinned when you're putting consumer good out there. Like, you're gonna get criticized, you know. And I know I work in a creative profession. Criticism and critique is part of it. So maybe I'm just more used to it. I don't know. Like, I'm not gonna get defensive if somebody, you know, points something out that, hey, you screwed that up. And we may have a dialogue about it.
Yeah, and nothing wrong with dialogue. I mean, I've been criticized many times over the years, you know, for things that I've written, and I'm always willing to have an intelligent discussion. And, you know, when I'm wrong, you know, or if somebody points out, you know, it shows me, you know, that I've said something that's incorrect, I'm more than willing to change my views and you know, and change what I've written, you know, if I'm in fact incorrect. But
I'm never incorrect.
Well, no, I've been wrong on many occasions, you know, at least 3 or 4 times. You know, but you don't have to be an asshole about it.
Yeah, it's
have an intelligent conversation. You don't need to start name calling. And I'm not going to repeat the kinds of things that these people have been saying.
The treatment of women online, especially, is
it's just
gross.
It's ridiculous.
And I wish that we weren't at that place culturally. I don't understand how you get there, except for I do, and there's a lot of different factors. You bring it back to sort of the car thing too. Like, it used to always bug me how Autoblog would do this sort of the girls of the XYZ car show. And I vocally sort of criticized that to John Neff, and I think I wasn't the only one, because at some point they stopped doing it. Because I was like, we should not be doing this. We should not be encouraging automakers sort of following that old convention. It's gross. I don't know. I have a lot more to say about it.
And most automakers, have moved away from that, at auto shows, moved away from, having scantily clad women, hanging over their cars. I mean,
at least in the U.S. I know in other markets and in other cultures, it still goes on, and that's.
They've moved away from it in Europe in particular. I think China, it still happens, but I think even there, it's starting to become less and less.
Yeah, it's just there's still issues within our industry, and hopefully we can continue to be more progressive and treat people as people instead of objects. And that's moving on.
All right, I think that's enough for this week.
All right, are we good now? Do we want to cover anything else, or we want to just?
I think that's enough for this week.
All right. Well, sorry for the long delay. Maybe we'll try to come back at the end of this week too. I know we say this a lot. I wanted to get a show out, and I know you wanted to get a show out, so we did that, and hopefully we can come back at the end of this week and update on what else has been happening over the next few days. And if there's questions, concerns, if you want to tell us to shut up, you know where to find us. We're on Facebook and Twitter and all the different channels, and we'll talk to everybody next week.
See ya.
Owning a boat comes with a number of perks, like being able to say ahoy or land ho and not feel weird about it. So here's another perk. Geico's boat insurance offers access to the largest towing fleet on the water. And with specialist support from agents that are as passionate about boating as you are, there's so much value that you'll want to say, shiver me timbers, and not feel weird about that either. Get more with Geico.